Cool. So the first question is coming to Charlotte. She's awoken from her pre-talk sleep. I don't know if that's a ritual for her routine.
Yeah.
So let's talk about habit formation and behavior change. So habit formation and behavior change can feel like a bit of an abstract concept with no defined rules to follow. It's not as easy as just go low carb. How would someone get started in developing good habits and breaking bad ones?
So developing good habits is actually a process that has kind of been spoken about and has been written about. So I don't know if anyone's read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. I bet James is going to get his coffee out now. There we go. So what I'm not going to do in this little talk is reiterate his entire book, as much as it would be cool to. But he talks about the science of creating habits depends on a cue, a craving, a result, and a reward. So you have this cue, this thing that stimulates this entire process. So for somebody, that cue might be the fact that their grandma bought donuts and brought them home, which then triggers a cue for a donut. And the result is that they eat a donut, and the reward is that they get all this serotonin and endorphins from having eaten the donut. And that creates, and the more we repeat this pattern, it creates these neural pathways, which creates these habits. So we need to kind of manipulate these to our advantage to create the habits that we want to create. And that's essentially how habit building works. We have to strengthen these pathways by repeating them. So then we basically have to do the opposite to break bad habits. We have to make them unattractive. We have to make them difficult. We have to remove the cues. We have to remove the cravings. And then therefore the results and the rewards for those can't happen. But something that I do want to mention with regards to breaking bad habits is digging into the role of the bad habit and realizing why it's there and what it's supporting. And if you remove that habit, what are you leaving? Like, you're leaving a gap, and what is going to happen as a result of leaving that gap? Where did this habit come from? Kind of as Tim has just mentioned, he's just spoken about coping mechanisms. Is this habit a coping mechanism that you developed to cope with something else? And then is another part of your life going to come crashing down if you remove this thing? So something that I commonly see is people who, I don't want to use the word binge eat, but that's kind of the way people mostly describe it, is they binge eat at night. And then they try and break this habit, and then they have a bit of an emotional crash because they realize that this habit is actually a coping mechanism, and this is put in place by them to help deal with things like loneliness, like sadness, maybe a little bit of mental health issues, and we don't know that. But yeah, that's something to consider when you're trying to build and break habits. Like, what are these habits there for, and how do these serve me, before you try and bring them and take them away. So yeah, when we're building habits, it's helpful to have to build good habits, it's helpful to make these things as easy for yourself as possible. So make them satisfying, make them achievable, make them appealing, and make them obvious. Because if a habit isn't obvious, you probably won't do it. And then obviously the opposite comes from breaking habits. So make it invisible, remove the cues, make it unattractive, unsatisfying, and as difficult as you possibly can. So yeah, that's kind of the process of building and getting rid of habits.
Cool. That's awesome. Anyone want to add anything to that?
Just another book, firstly, and I'll let everyone else chime in, is have you guys ever read The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg?
I haven't, no.
I started it, never finished it.
It's a brilliant book. It was a bit ahead of James Clear's stuff, so I think James Clear's a bit more he's the new kid on the block when it comes to habits. But Charles Duhigg's book was brilliant. It kind of did a lot of the initial research around the rodent models and then how that transferred into humans. And it was the same idea as you said, Charlotte, about this kind of how do you develop new habits, but also how do you break them. And he used the example of, and I think even Stephen Gainey talked about Charles Duhigg in his book as well, The Hungry Brain, was this idea of making it incredibly difficult for you to make something happen. So for example, if you have a tub of ice cream sitting in the freezer, at least if you're me, that pint is gone. Whereas if it's in the supermarket, which is a 10-minute drive down the road, the likelihood of you making the physical effort to go and do that is way, it's just not worth the essentially I refer to this term of value of future rewards, is if I take this action now, what is going to be does the instant gratification of doing it now outweigh the value of the future reward that I'm going to get from this? And so there's always that kind of weigh up that's constantly going on all the time as well in your brain, like, is it worth really making that much effort? Yeah, okay, I'll go and do it, or nah, not worth it.
I actually have a quote written down from the Stephen Guyenet conference that he did for Mac Nutrition, and it's in my notes in my phone. I actually remembered about it the other day, but it says to limit food cue exposure in your personal environment, and I wrote this in capital letters, so I must have thought it was important at the time. But letting yourself forget the cue over time, and the longer you go without indulging like your danger foods and your cravings, the easier it is to not eat them. So that's always something to bear in mind, which kind of reinforces what you just said, Ross.
Just on what Ross and Charlotte have already said, is to just summarise from my perspective, is very much setting up your environment so it aligns with what habits you're trying to create. And if the two of them coincide, you dramatically increase your odds of actually adopting those new habits and breaking the ones that you don't want to keep.
Yeah,
and I think we should just quickly say, Ross, get Aleko to shut up. That's the
Was that your cat?
Yeah.
That's a cat.
I thought it was close.
I was like, somebody. I would just echo everything everyone else has said, and also to add in, especially when you're looking at habits, I think it's like when you're thinking about establishing good habits and breaking bad habits, understanding what it is you're trying to do. So why is what you're trying to do a good habit? And is it a really useful, really effective habit for you to have? And are the habits you're trying to break really bad habits, or what's actually going on there? So I think, there are lots of habits you could make yourself do, but creating new habits is quite like it takes a lot of time, it takes some effort. So you want to make sure that what you're getting out of that is going to be something substantial, and you're going to feel the difference of that. So kind of like as you do with food, and as all of us will do with our clients with nutrition, looking at that kind of good, bad value and really understanding that and breaking that down before you start the process of kind of creating and breaking down.
Yeah. I'd also say, again, agreeing with that and adding on one more, behaviors that get immediately rewarded tend to get repeated, and behaviors that get immediately kind of punished or have kind of negative outcomes connotated with it tend to get avoided. And a lot of the habits we're trying to create with our clients immediately aren't that great. So going to the gym, it can be a bit grueling, especially if it's not a kind of comfortable environment. It's painful, it's tough. Whereas eating a few donuts immediately is quite rewarding, it's quite tasty, it's pleasurable, but in the long term, it might have kind of a negative outcome. Whereas going to the gym in the long term might have a good outcome. So it's trying to bring those positive outcomes on the kind of good habits forwards. So if you're going to the gym and you don't really like it, it's painful, going with someone, or if you don't like going out walking where you live because it's horrible, you can go drive somewhere else where it's nice, or you can maybe start listening to a podcast you enjoy. So you're trying to make that initial unfavorable habit, which is going to be good long term, a favorable habit, or positive reinforcement.
Yeah, and I think in terms of like what Mark just said as well, is there's a few clients of mine, like when they start, like, I want to train 6 days a week, and it's about setting those habits up to be realistic. So is going from not training, for example, or never having dieted before, to suddenly going, right, I want to go and lose 2 stone straight away, or I want to go and train 6 days a week. Is that realistic? So I think also it's about setting up expectations for those habits to develop.
Yeah, you're not going to wake up a different person overnight. And I think that a lot of the time, even if you look at New Year's, so everyone like kind of sets New Year's resolutions and goals, and that's not necessarily negative, but kind of 2nd of January comes around and people are like, right, so this is me now. And actually there's a lot that goes into that. It is a process, and you have to kind of, as you said, be realistic with the targets you're setting yourself.
I think my New Year's resolution this year was to be content with what I had, and then I figured everything else on top of that is a bonus. So almost like I can't lose.
I love that. That's great.
So I'm not sure if I'm feeling content or what right now. I'm just very tired. So I'm sure I'll feel like this was a bonus tomorrow. Cool. So everyone's saying that James Clear. You might as well just rename yourself to James Habit. It might as well be the way. And ordering it on Audible. So yeah, I've lost the flow of everything. So, Flo, we're going to go to you. I've lost the flow, but we're coming back to Flo. At what point should someone start thinking about life after dieting? And is this something you can prepare yourself for? If so, how?
So I think it depends on the person, but I would say prepare yourself for life after dieting kind of as soon as possible, if you can. I think there's different ways you can go about your kind of dieting process, and how your dieting or kind of fat loss process might look. Sorry, lost my words. Might look. It could be very different to what maintenance looks like. So there's lots of different ways to achieve fat loss, and it doesn't all have to be a smooth transition into maintenance. It might actually be that you've given yourself certain constraints to achieve that, and then you want to go into your maintenance. And I think trying to prepare yourself as quickly as possible is beneficial, because otherwise you kind of get to the end of a kind of dieting phase, which can be really tough and mentally really tough on your motivation. And especially when you get down, if you've dieted and you're losing a lot of fat, you also tend to kind of, by the end, you're probably more fatigued, you're probably more hungry, you're probably finding life a bit tougher anyway. So giving yourself strategies in place already that you know you can switch to is a lot kind of easier than kind of getting to that end of that dieting phase and being like, oh God, what do I do now? So yeah, I think preparation is always a good thing. If so, how? So I think it depends on, I know everyone says that, but it depends what you've done before and what you want to achieve after. So say you've done a fat loss phase and you want to go into a maintenance phase, and maintenance forever. Have you been tracking during that period? So have you been tracking your calories and your macros? If so, I'm guessing that as you go in towards maintenance and you looking at life after dieting, you might not, you don't want to be probably doing that forever. So how are you going to transition out of tracking those calories and those macros? What are the habits that you can start instilling towards the end of your fat loss phase that can carry you through and towards maintenance? So I think it's understanding the components of your dieting phase. So did you go low carb? Did you track? What did you do to achieve that? And then think about whether you want those long term, those kind of things. And a lot of them, maybe you don't want to continue long term. So how can you transition them back into your life in a balanced way and over a period of time?
Can I jump in there, Simon?
Go for it, buddy.
Yeah, so we kind of employ a bit of what we call like a 5-stage approach at the Better Body Collective amongst the whole team, and it kind of goes like this. Depending on where someone's at, there might be one of 5 phases that they start at. Generally speaking, it's going to be either prepare, which most people will spend some form of time, whether they're essentially not physically or psychologically ready to go through the rigors of a fat loss phase. We need to get their body into either a psychological, physiological, or both state to be ready to actually handle because it was quite a stressful event in the body, which is dieting. Once they get to a point where they are ready, and that can last anywhere between a couple of weeks to a few months or more, we then get to a point where we establish, we call it transform. Quite original, I know, but that's what we call it. So transform, and that could be potentially multiple phases. They might have to go through that particular part of that it might be like 2 or 3 cycles of transform with, you may potentially like many reverse diets, maintenance breaks, refeeds, depending on where that person's at. We utilize different methods depending on the individual. So say they've reached their goal, they've had that kind of quote unquote transformation. We kind of know that sometimes people actually look better when they reverse diet than they did at the end of the fat loss phase. So after transform, we then take them through what's called solidify, which is kind of this idea of slowly reverse dieting back up to their new maintenance, which is either going to be slightly lower, around the same, or slightly more. It just depends on the individual. People have different metabolic adaptations to dieting, right? After that, they then get 2 choices. Either they're going to move on to what's called optimize, which is a phase of either gaining muscle, getting stronger, chasing a performance goal, or if they just feel like, you know what, man, I just want to chill out. That was enough for the moment. I just want to get to good maintenance, and then I want to cruise for a period of time. we'll then get them into what's called rewards. And we explain to them that reward is essentially where we want them to exist the majority of their life. And so the end game is explained right from the start, before they even enter the prepare phase, before they even start fat loss. It's been explained very clearly how long it's going to take approximately for them to go through every single phase. And the end game is maintenance, not the fat loss result. The fat loss result is just a checkpoint along their entire journey. And I think when you set those expectations really clearly from the start, it just gives people that bit of, all right, well, this is a little bit bigger than just, that fat loss. And then I think we've had chats all through the weekend about how you can't just be in love with that end of fat loss physique. You have to also be really, really content with your maintenance physique as well, because that's the one you're going to spend the most time in.
I think just to maybe add to that a little bit, I think I talked about it on the talk with Amelia and others, Louis and Christy, and we talked about the fact that I'd done a podcast with Melissa from Nathan's Periodization, and she had this very interesting approach that she would almost do maintenance first and then do the diet, so that you the way she described it was almost like, once you've done maintenance and you've got this healthy relationship with food, you understand about scale weight fluctuations, you understand what's going on with your body, what sort of maybe dieting strategy is going to work well based on what works well at maintenance. All that then becomes is a function of dropping calories at that point. There's no extra stuff to think about. I mean, there will obviously be little twists and turns along the way that you need to make, but you're coming at it from a very strong position. So I think that kind of made me rethink things, certainly with my clients, and thinking, okay, well, maybe right now is not the time to diet. Maybe we can work on some other things and get you in a place where dieting becomes more of a more comfortable, more easy, more less stressful process, and therefore thinking about both maintenance prior and after, and then the dieting bit becomes like the meat in the sandwich, let's say.
Yeah, it's true, Simon, because like you said, I think Amelia touched on it earlier, like that whole hypothalamic amenorrhea as well. Their starting point is essentially going to be a reverse diet for as long as it takes to get them to a really healthy place. Like you said, the starting point is not the same for everyone. So that's so true.
Cool. Awesome. Mark, we're going to come to you now. So is the mindset and process of weight maintenance, which we've just been talking about, different to that of dieting? In your experience, is it something that's harder to coach, the mindset of a maintenance diet rather than like dieting per se?
Yeah, I think that completely depends on the kind of strategy you take, but I'm basically just going to echo all of you now again. But I think it starts off before dieting. So you need to, first of all, make sure you're in a kind of positive mindset. You're not in a place of kind of self-hate. You're kind of content with yourself. You've got a positive relationship with food. And more importantly than anything, you're kind of actually ready to change. Because if you do have that, it makes that diet so much easier, and especially coming off that diet. So when you're actually dieting, I'd say it is easier because you do, especially if you've got kind of goals set and you're kind of working towards something, you've got kind of extrinsic rewards coming in, you've got compliments, you've got noticeable changes, you're seeing progress and, scale weight, photos, whatever it is. Which I think is really helpful of getting to where you want to be even quicker, which is another kind of big thing. You always hear dieting needs to be sustainable, but the actual diet doesn't need to be sustainable because we don't want to be dieting forever. We don't want to be in a calorie deficit forever. Maintenance obviously needs to be sustainable, hence maintenance, but the diet itself doesn't. So if we can actually get to that place where they want to be with managing expectations quicker, then I think that's almost a better thing, as long as they have got that original positive mindset. Because a lot of people then say, oh, what if they've got a bad relationship with food? Kind of going a bit quicker is a bad thing. I'd argue they shouldn't be dieting at all. So as long as they've got original kind of positive mindset, then getting to that kind of end goal quicker is probably better. And then at that point, really working on maintenance. But even like Flo said, more importantly, as you're going through that kind of diet, you want to be creating kind of habits to live and kind of being coached and learn how to live at maintenance. So whether that's kind of gradually throughout the diet, or if you want to take maybe a few diet breaks in between, just to kind of stop and say, right, we're going to, really focus on maintenance for a bit, coaching to live. Then we can kind of get another little aggressive drop, coach to live, whilst kind of maintaining those habits. So I think a big kind of, misinformed dogma within the fitness industry is dieting needing to be sustainable. I think it's actually the maintenance, working towards maintenance needs to be sustainable. We can make some changes, get to that point, but the end goal, maintenance, is the thing we want to sustain, not a diet. So we want to come out of that as quick as possible, ideally. And all the kind of literature actually supports that, because they do see people getting motivated and kind of dropping weight quicker and actually holding it there, as long as there is a good maintenance plan executed after that. And that's not like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that's like kind of months, like staying with your client and making sure they are okay. Maybe letting them know they might gain a couple of pounds here and there, but staying with them and coaching them how to live, I think, is crucial. So going back to the question, I think weight maintenance is a lot easier to coach if you've, like Flo stated, you've already started early on. But I think you can get there a bit quicker than most people think. It doesn't always need to be slow, sustainable changes if we've got that original mindset kind of ingrained really well. But I think the kind of weight stigma behind fast weights of weight loss is because a lot of people do that without that maintenance plan and just put it all back on, because they kind of get to maintenance and they've been like getting down there. They've had all these kind of habits put in place, but they haven't been coached to live. So as long as you coach to live, I think weight maintenance can be coached a lot easier than it has to be. But I often see in the industry, people or clients aren't getting coached to live and they're kind of just left there like, oh, what to do? And then that is a really hard time to kind of coach maintenance. So I think it depends on the strategy you take more than anything else. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents, really.
Yeah, yay. I would to say, I think a lot of people as well have dieted for such a large portion of their life that kind of the maintenance, the mindset of maintenance is a really, really hard thing to grasp, quite like scary for a lot of them, because I think also many of them feel that their goal is so unachievable because they've been dieting for so long and haven't got there and haven't maintained it. So I think that technique that Mark spoke about, that I've used with my clients, a few of my clients as well, about doing kind of like intermittent maintenance stages in their fat loss kind of journey. Sorry to use the word, but and especially the clients who from like our initial discussions, I know have dieted for a lot of their life and are scared about that maintenance from very early on, thinking, okay, how can we get you comfortable with the idea of maintenance? Let's start bringing that in relatively regularly so you can start understanding that and being comfortable with that process. So when we get to the end goal, it's all a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of like reiterate the points again, I think there's far too often you see people either go from one extreme to another. So in the end, ultimately you see the yo-yo dieting effect, where people try and diet very hard, and because they're not used to living at maintenance, they don't necessarily understand what maintenance is, that then they then struggle, and then it goes from a diet almost to a dramatic surplus, and then that's why it's reverse, isn't it? That's why the unhealthy dieting process can happen, where it's I'm going to put my arms down, where it's going up and down that weight, and why maintenance can be really difficult to coach sometimes.
Yeah, can I add to that as well? Sorry, Charlotte. Apologies.
I was just going to say, I think people need to remember as well that when it comes to maintenance, you don't necessarily have to maintain your end of diet physique, and a little bit of weight regain is not a failure at all. Yeah. Because if you start up here and then you diet down to here, but then come back up to like here, that's way better than where you were to start with. So it's not a failure at all. It's just a natural process.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think the problem is a lot of clients, and it's the way that almost, I guess, the fitness industry is conditioned clients to expect, is kind of like you do your 8-12 week transformation, which is just completely unrealistic. The example I give to clients is most comp preps take about 20 to 24 weeks. And that's for people who are in really good condition. So if you think you're going to achieve your dream body in 8 to 12 weeks, I'd probably forget about that real quick. And so the problem is a lot of clients, they put the stock in the fat loss part of the coaching. But the way we explain to our clients from the start is, listen, the fat loss part of the coaching, like we say, is just a checkpoint. And actually where the real value comes in here is the part you've never done before, which is the exit strategy and all of the things around that, like then maintaining afterwards and everything else. And so getting them to understand the value of that, and actually that's quite hard. That's actually the hard part to implement, not the dieting part. Most people we know can lose weight keeping it off or reverse dieting. And let's be honest, like you said, Charlotte, I don't have any clients who, once they've dropped, and it's another point worth touching on as well, is most people, if you said to them, how much weight do you think you need to lose to get to the physique you think you want? And they'll often be like, you just lose like 6 kilos, 8 kilos. But then actually at least double that. And that's realistically where they have to get that physique they want. And so the reality is that they're super depleted, calories are low, there's very little glycogen stores. When you start reverse dieting up and bring a more normal level of carbohydrates back into the diet anyway, they're going to be holding more intracellular fluid, they're going to be more fuller, and actually they're going to look better and perform better anyway. So it's actually to be expected that, like you say, if they don't gain a few kilos, I'd actually be a bit like, you need more food. We need to give you more food and get you up to that new maintenance.
And just to build on what you're saying there, Ross, I had a specific question coming from Harrison that says, do refeeds help with life post-dieting / post-show in order to prevent a bad rebound? So I guess there's a part of that to say, well, there is going to be some sort of weight gain. You're not going to expect to have show level competition ready physique all the time. So there's an expectation that's going to rebound, but you're going to get some weight regain at some point. But are refeeds a valid approach in that scenario?
Can I speak to that first and then let everyone else just dive in on it? Because I've got a couple of clients going through refeeds at the moment, and it's not just a strategy for after the diet ends, it's a strategy you can use while they're dieting, and it can often be used to really good effect. So for example, you know that they've been really, really adherent to the plan. In my case, these two guys have been incredibly on point, and either they're hitting a plateau or say, for example, they're just like either getting, there's two parts of it. There's either going to be a psychological refeed or there's going to be a physiological refeed. If they're psychologically getting to a point where they're just like, I'm finding it hard to, you almost have the telltale signs they're going to go off track, you might just give in one or two refeeds at maintenance just because you just know that they're really on that borderline now. Whereas if psychologically they're in a good place and they're happy to keep trucking on, if you kind of notice that, and one of my big cues is if they're starting to drop a lot of weight, and we do a lot of like weekly averages and compare weekly averages. If I notice those weekly averages are starting to get too big, that's a telltale sign for me that is things are moving maybe potentially a little bit too quickly, and that's not always a bad thing. But then if you marry that with some of the biomarkers as well, it's sometimes worth, you know what, listen, you're well ahead of schedule here. We can afford to give you a couple of refeeds. And the funny thing is what actually happens often is that weight might go up initially, and especially sometimes even if they've been at a plateau, weight might go up initially like by 0.3, 0.4. As soon as they introduce back in the regular calories again, things just start shooting down the way again. The other scenario where it can be really interesting is, say someone has finished their diet and you're like, right, we're going to give you like a week at maintenance, or we're just going to start reverse dieting you straight away. I've got one guy now who's literally, he's had 2 bumps up in calories and he's still dropping. His diet's done, but we've literally reversed him up twice already and he's still dropping. So what I do is check in tomorrow. It's going to be a case of, well, you're getting more food because your body's responding incredibly well to this. So yeah, not only is it a good strategy post-dieting and post-show, it's a strategy you can use ideally also in the lead up to the end of a diet or show as well.
Cool. Anybody anything to add on refeeds?
So speaking from some personal experience of having dieted for a show, nothing quite psychologically prepares you for the end. As I've spoken to a lot of competitors about this, I've spoken to a lot of people who, so maybe some people can psychologically prepare themselves. But yeah, it takes a lot to be able to come out of the end of a competition prep, especially with sort of no adverse consequences and no impact on your relationship with food. And some people can do it, but a lot of people can't. So refeeds won't necessarily mitigate that, but they can help, if anything, by giving you a little bit more flexibility to have some of the foods that you might not be able to sort of fit into your calories, especially if you're, like I was, like a 50-something kilo female. Your calories get pretty low and there isn't room for donuts and cookies in there. So it does just give you that psychological break, as Ross said, and sort of helps you to satisfy some of those cravings and keeps you on track by knowing that you can go really hard for these like 2 weeks or whatever, and you have this little bit of time of increased calories at maintenance, things get a bit easier, and you know that you reserve some willpower and you can dive back into the deficit again and hit it really hard and probably increase adherence, which might I can hear the cat again. So you might get, and what was I saying? So yeah, by bringing those calories up, you might then get better fat loss results just by increasing adherence to the deficit again, because you've got that willpower back and that motivation back again, because you've had a little bit of a chill out time. So yeah, that was the end of my
we've got a great question hanging in the wings of the live, but I want to ask one more because we're kind of on this subject already, and I'm going to fire it at James. So after dieting, many people struggle with like motivation because there's maybe no longer a specific goal that they've been working towards something very, very specific. Now there's kind of nothing. Is it important for someone to keep continuously setting goals, or is there an alternative way to reframe what happens after dieting?
I think ultimately it kind of comes in two parts. So in the sense of, to begin with is how they've achieved their initial weight loss goal, or whatever the goal that they've set themselves. And in theory, if it's a weight loss goal, what's their history of dieting in the past? I think it depends on the individual first and foremost, and circumstances that they've achieved the goal. So has it been, say for example, a crash diet, but it's been one that's been severely restrictive, so they've removed the foods that they enjoy, so potentially it might not be a healthy diet for them as an individual. So in order to avoid like the yo-yo dieting, it might be a new goal for them, for example, might be to understand actually what food is and how all food can be formed by a healthy diet. Because if the way that they dieted, say, has as a byproduct created an unhealthy relationship with food, then their new goal, in my opinion, should be then to create a healthy relationship with food. Whereas if it's, say, for example, been a slow process where they've been able to enjoy, their favorite foods, ones that they enjoy, and they've actually enjoyed the process more, so it's not being as stressful, then it's going to be a much easier process for them to just be able to relax at maintenance and actually just enjoy it essentially without even needing a goal. And I think depending on what goal that might be, kind of depends on what their tracking method was before, if they had one. So was it potentially like daily weigh-in? Was it, measurements, appetite, motivation, things like that? And then depending on what it was, then you might want to change it to a less restrictive. So if it was, say, using MyFitnessPal every single day for weeks on end, it might be a case of taking a step back and then just purely looking at, hunger levels, or it might be just looking at protein intake. So it's not quite as intense as beforehand. I think, and the second part would be what's their focus now? So they've achieved it. So would they in theory be happy with, at maintenance? But if their weight fluctuates slightly, so a couple of pounds, 3 pounds over, such as the guys have already said, if they're okay with that, then again, they can enjoy the process more, and a new goal wouldn't be required. Whereas if it's a no, then again, the goal should probably be more to focus on their relationship with food and how they perceive their, their own health and how they perceive their own body, for example's sake, because it's not just about being shredded, I guess. But to summarize, I guess the most important factor is to identify the weight loss strategy being used at the beginning, and then marry that up in terms of post results. So in order to make sure that you necessarily don't need that goal, if that's what they're looking for. So,
I think clients are always so keen to try and move the goalposts. As soon as they get to their goal, they're like, right, I need another goal. But then you kind of ask where they started and why they wanted to get to where they are now. And a lot of the time it's because I wanted to feel more happy or confident and stuff. And I said, well, do you feel that? And they're like, oh no, when we've got to really work on your mindset again, because obviously you're not where you need to be. So you need to create, again, that kind of positive mindset, heal your relationship with food if it has been damaged, before definitely moving those goalposts again or setting new goals. And a couple of things I think to help kind of increase that. One, I think you touched on it earlier, James, is your environment kind of dictates your performance. I remember Dr. Mike speaking about this on, I think, one of his podcasts, and he said when he started going to a new gym, or I think he might have tried gyms in the past, I don't want to be kind of misquoted on this, he found it hard, but as soon as he went to the one, I think, where Jay Alderton was, he started doing classes and he started making friends, and it made the process so much easier for him to kind of get up and go, especially when they're texting you, oh, you coming to this class? So I think you do need to create a environment where you are surrounded by like-minded people with those goals. If you're surrounded by loads of friends that are trying to, go out to the pub or do this and against kind of where you've got to, it's going to be really hard to maintain. And another thing in the research is NEAT. NEAT's really good for kind of weight loss, but even more, I'd say, is important for maintenance. So if you can create some kind of good grounded habits for increasing their NEAT or maintaining where their NEAT is, if it has got to a point where it's good, then I think that's going to set them up for pretty good kind of future.
Yeah, and I think just building on that as well, I think people naturally like to set goals, whether it be in the workplace, at home, whatever it might be. So I think if you've achieved that weight loss goal and you don't then need to set a goal because you're comfortable at maintenance, it might then be to change actually from the weight loss goal to a different lifestyle goal. So say, for example, as Mark said, if you're going to a new gym and you like that environment, it might be a case of actually my new goal is to start to get into, specific classes that they've enjoyed more, to then form, new habits and almost like new skills, for example. So I know like Mark does a lot of like rock climbing, for example. So the goal might shift from a weight related goal to an alternative goal.
Yeah, I think to maybe add something to that as well, I would say that a lot of it, again, maybe my personal experience as well, in that would be to enjoy the process of whatever it is that you're doing. So as just an example, I have zero goals around my physique and my health from terms of weight management and stuff like that. But I just love the process of going to the gym and training. I know that's not necessarily where everybody's head is at, but if you can develop something that you enjoy that's related to maintaining a level of health and fitness to some degree, if you just enjoy that, then that makes you don't even need a goal, because you just enjoy doing that thing. And that actual activity is what brings you the enjoyment, the happiness, not any output of result of doing that. So I know that if I go to the gym and I eat my protein and do all the good stuff we've been talking about for 2 days, my physique will change. But for me, I literally have no attachment to the outcome. I kind of say, well, I like doing this, I will do it. And what will be is the outcome of that. And I know it will be positive because I'm doing things that positive in the sense that if building muscle was a positive thing for you. So I think that finding that thing or those things that you enjoy and you love that part of the process, then I think everything else starts to become a little bit easier. And then you don't have to force yourself to set goals, because the goal is not required anymore, because it's just now this is just the daily life that I enjoy, and therefore there we go.
Yeah, I think one thing that I found really helps Simon with that is such a great point, because I think a lot of people will often they find it difficult to disassociate the diet from the training. They almost see it as this big one all-encompassing thing, versus seeing the training as, well, the training provides one benefit and the nutrition side of things provides another. And yes, they are, of course, supported and linked, but if almost like the way I get my clients to think about it is, even when you're dieting, I still want you to be progressing and learning week to week in the gym, and that's a constant, that doesn't change. So whether you're dieting, whether you're building, whether you're maintaining, going to the gym and constantly chasing that pursuit of self-mastery, that's a constant thing that you're going after. And so like you said, I think it's a huge win for a client if they can get to the point where they enjoy the process, regardless of whether it's attached to a fat loss goal, whether it's attached to maintenance, whether it's attached to building muscle. I think that's a really cool place to get people to. Sure.
I think last thing I'd add would be that I think I agree with everything everyone said. I would say that process can start in the dieting phase, and actually if you get that process of so if you get them to enjoy the process or have them setting goals that aren't solely focused on weight, and fat loss, I think it can help clients long term when they get out of that dieting phase, because they have other things going on in terms of what they enjoy other than just dieting fat loss. It has to be fat loss. So one of the things I do with clients when they come to me and they want to lose weight, then great, cool, we can do this. What else do we want to think about? Like, do you want to get stronger? So some of them would be like, oh, I kind of also want to do 10 press ups. And I'm like, cool, let's do 10 press ups. That's like a great goal to have. Like, let's add that into the mix. It's not one or the other, you know? So I think trying to layer them up from the beginning is a good thing.
Awesome. So, right, I'm going to bring in this live question, which I'm going to look to Charlotte to, because Charlotte was on our performance nutrition talk earlier. So Phil's got a link in there. Can you recommend how to build the habits to eat the amount of that's required for an endurance sport, but then breaking those habits once you've had your race, done the event, and don't start to take on so many calories that are now not required, I would assume? Okay.
So I'm going to use, what kind of example can we use? Something extreme. Something like training for an Ironman, maybe, requires a lot of food. And I'm guessing that this person has probably done this and potentially has found that it's difficult to take on that amount of calories, which it is, especially if you're male. It can be really difficult to take on the amount of calories required to not start losing astronomically large amounts of body weight once you start endurance training. For things like Ironman, where you're out on the bike for like 6, 7, 8 hours at a time. And appetite is reduced by exercise. So you have this like double whammy of like you're expending all these calories, but then your appetite plummets. So yeah, you have to meet these energy needs, but you don't want to. So a good place to start is the beginning, when motivation is really high. And this is the time when you want to start trying to instill these cues and these triggers, because you have all this motivation to use, so you might as well use it while it's there before it wanes. So you can set things up to be as easy as possible for you in the long run. So things like having a big stash of snacks and gels and stuff like that you can take with you on rides, having a saddlebag that you have just under your saddle that you keep stuff on for long rides and stuff. I think I've gravitated back to cycling with this, but you get the idea. Like having, if you go out running with a camelback, like having snacks in there so that you're taking on calories, stocking your freezer well, doing some batch cooking, making life as easy as possible. But then you have the flip side of how do you break this habit once you've had your race and don't take on as many calories. So you have been doing this endurance sport where all of this energy is being used and you need all of this food. And then this is something that you see a lot with athletes when they retire. So not to sound harsh, but athletes tend to retire and then they gain body fat. They get fatter because they have this thing called delayed acclimatization of appetite, where your energy expenditure has reduced, but your appetite is still kind of up here because you've been used to eating this much and used to burning this many calories, and your body's like, oh, cool, I'm still going to eat this much. But in reality, when your exercise energy expenditure was up here and met it, it's now somewhere down here. So you have this whole surplus that's going on. So yeah, in terms of breaking that bad habit, that again might take, everything takes a little bit of willpower to start off with, but you just do the exact opposite. You remove those highly palatable foods from your diet, you start substituting things in. So maybe instead of having Nutella on your porridge in the morning, you start having frozen raspberries or something like that. So just making those habits as easy as possible, or as was kind of previously mentioned, making that habit of eating a lot of calories more difficult. That's anyone else want to build on that?
Just to jump on, just from what you just said there, rather than just removing the habit at the end, you might have these habits you've built up. A lot of the time, instead of removing that habit, you can just kind of swap it. So if it, like for a weight loss, rather than just endurance, if it was a weight loss thing, if they are having a tub of ice cream in the evenings, or in Simon's case, the Chinese takeaway, how can we swap that? Like for the ice cream, the easy one, just go to a low calorie one, and then they've still got, if it was a coping mechanism, that habit ingrained, but it's going to have positive kind of outcomes because it's a lot lower in calories. So if they are knocking back for the endurance, loads of high calorie palatable foods, it's keeping in maybe tasty foods that aren't quite high in calories. So it's just making kind of swaps there.
And then in terms of remembering those habits, stacking habits is quite good. So if you have got something you do every single day, which is a habit, at that point, creating a new habit from there. So if you're brushing your teeth or you're doing something you do every day, then probably not brushing your teeth. I was about to say knock back a shake. That'd be quite horrible tasting shake, but something you do every day. So one of my clients, she's iron deficient, and she has to take her iron tablets, and she actually gets it kind of injected, but she still has to take her iron tablets. And I give her a few other supplements to take, but she says she always forgets to take them. I said, what one thing do you do every day? So we went through quite a few things she does every day. We were out all her habits. And one of them, she said, was she logs onto her computer at work every day. And I said, well, okay, why don't we just keep supplements there every single night? So as soon as you log onto your computer, you'll see that and take it. And she just started taking it because it's already kind of around an old ingrained habit. So habit stacking can be really helpful, I think.
And just to quickly say, you mentioned that about swapping. I tell you, I'm not swapping my Chinese takeaway for anything. I have a very good relationship with food, and I'm going to eat it without guilt, without shame.
I wasn't trying to shame you. Sorry, no food shaming here.
And with zero mindfulness as well, because it's going to be as quick as possible. So just to clarify that.
Just to jump on Charles' point as well, it's from past experience for myself as well. So I've done a couple of like large endurance events. So one was 5 marathons back to back, and when coming off of that, I just stopped training and carried on eating as I was during training and during the marathons, and I piled on weight. And this was years ago. And then about 3 years ago, I did another one, which was a 12-day triathlon, which was 3 Ironmans back to back, basically. And but I really
gloss over that.
So, but in terms of my training, I had to kind of like slowly reduce that, one for my body, but also two for like my actual calorie expenditure. And what I did in terms of my nutrition was what the guys have said in terms of calorie swap. So I would initially start the day with pretty much the biggest full English breakfast that you could possibly imagine. But after the triathlon, I just swapped it out from, say, like scrambled eggs on toast. And yeah, I might have had like 3 eggs, for example, and a little bit of other stuff, but I didn't have like 4 rashers of bacon as well. So just kind of like being more mindful and actually using that experience. So I think what the guys have said, in my experience, is very, very required.
You can adapt the habits that you've already built. Adapting a habit is probably easier than trying to build a new one.
For sure.
So you already have breakfast every day, so you can work on things that work for you. Make it fit into your lifestyle as well. There's nothing worse than trying to lever something into your life that doesn't fit.
Cool. Right. We've got about 10 minutes left. So we're going to do one more question, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a roundup to kind of close everything down. So if you're still with us at this time, well done. And especially Ross, because it's like, what, 1:30? I don't know. So hang around, but we'll answer one more question, which is quite complicated. It might take the full 10 minutes. There we go. Any suggestions for working with a client who repeatedly binges despite ongoing coaching remotely and support? He accepts and owns up to what he does and is happening a lot less, but it still happens. I do believe a lot has to do with how he achieved his greatest initial weight loss before working with me, long fasts, as he will resort back to this after a binge. To support the question above, we've removed tracking and removed the calorie target and just going off portion sizes and instilling good habits as easy as possible. So it's not hunger-based, but is linked to his beliefs about himself and his old habits, I feel. Very complicated question.
I'm happy to start on this one. Oh, Mark, do you want to go?
Charlotte, you
go. So this is deeper rooted just from initially hearing that. This is deeper rooted than just it being a bad habit. So it has become a habit. It's been something that happens, but it doesn't mean that it has to stay. So this is probably one of those things that probably does need some deeper emotional support. People will binge eat for all kinds of reasons, whether that's sadness, whether that's loneliness. And this kind of initially to me sounds like a case of self-sabotage. People self-sabotage for all kinds of reasons. I won't want to speculate as to why he's self-sabotaging. But yeah, some people seem to be doing really, really well. And then all of a sudden, they just feel like they're doing too well, and they go into this sort of self-destruct mode, and they start questioning themselves. So yeah, this person probably needs, this is probably beyond your scope of practice, and this person probably needs more help from somebody like a counsellor or a psychotherapist, or maybe even an eating disorder dietitian.
Yeah,
I would echo that.
Yeah.
Actual binge eating disorder is kind of out of our scope of practice. So
cool.
I think it's important.
Go for it.
I was just going to say, I think it's important to know when to, not just for you as a practitioner, but also for like the well-being of your client, knowing when to be like, actually, this needs a different kind. You need a different kind of help than I can provide. And I think being able to do that is a really important step, not just for you in terms of protecting, making sure you're not giving out information that could be potentially damaging if you're not specialized in this, but also at the end of the day, the health of your client is the most important thing. So
yeah, I think if it is kind of a binge restrict cycle and it has been like deeply rooted, like Charlotte said, it's definitely something that we should refer on to. But some people do just have kind of trigger foods, which you can kind of call it, you binge out on Jaffa cakes, you binge out on this, but sometimes it's not technically what would be classified as a binge. And in that case, that food you're kind of going to as an escape, and it is just maybe one or two of these kind of trigger foods that you just have. Something Martin goes on about is kind of disempowering that food. So if, let's say you did find yourself every now and then just opening up a Jaffa cake and then just having the whole pack, and actually saying, have a Jaffa cake every single night. And they're like, why just have it every single night? And then slowly it starts to disempower that food. So when they do come home kind of stressed, and when they normally would go for that kind of Jaffa cake, they don't actually want the Jaffa cake. So that's something to look at, kind of trigger foods. But actual binge eating disorders is a bit too much for us.
Cool. Awesome. So I think we have come to the end of our, I was going to say a number, but I don't know how many we've been through so far. So lots of talks. So thank you very much to Ross. Get some sleep, Ross. Thank you very much to Flo, Charlotte, Mark. Again, follow them all on social media. Show them some love and appreciation for the time they've given up. Remember as well, like I said before, they are all coaches. And if you kind of like what they're saying and you could find some benefit from them, why not hit them up instead of that weird ass Instagram influencer who just shoves a discount code down your throat. There you go. So that's
fine, I'll take the discount code off my bio.
Yeah. Awesome work.
Thank you very much, Simon.
And it's been such a pleasure to be a part of the whole thing, and you smashed it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Cool. Yeah, go on. Round of applause.
Take a bow.
Thank you.
Chinese.
I'm not very good at compliments, but thank you. Cool. Right, I'm going to get rid of you so I can just do a little quick thing to everybody without me having to look at your faces and put me off. Cool. So thank you very much, everybody. We are calling a wrap on this whole thing that is COFIT-19. But what I would say is that, again, just to reiterate the fact that, this didn't start out as something where we wanted to do a big grand event with thousands of people. This is something that's transformed and morphed and evolved over the course of a week or so to be something that's like really, really amazing. And I have to say that, personally, I'm looking through, while I'm looking down here, I'm not kind of like being ignorant and not listening to people, but I'm looking through all these notifications I've got on my phone and reading all the comments and looking at all the reshares in people's stories. And it's just really like heartwarming to see that people have got so much value from it, learned so much. And hopefully, you can see now that there are lots of coaches out there that genuinely want to help you achieve your goals, whatever situation you are in. So whether you are struggling at home at the moment in quarantine and things like that, there are huge amounts of people out there, these coaches, these speakers, who want to help you. You know, they're not out to always sell you something. Obviously, they have got coaching, they've got businesses, so don't forget that. But they're not always there to sell you something. They're always there to provide value. They get into this industry because they want to help people. They want to do their best for people. And if all you did over the course of the next couple of days was go through this group and follow every single one of them, if 1,800 people that joined this group followed every single one of these coaches in here, it would make a huge transformational differences to their lives, their businesses, and so on and so forth. And like I mentioned before, is the reason why I created this little event was because something that someone said to me, Mr. Dan Meredith, was that as you grow as a person and as you grow as a business, always extend the ladder down to somebody else to help them up. And we can always have a way of doing that. And it might not be obvious, but your ladder, your way of helping someone right now is to follow these coaches, is to show them a bit of love and to really kind of show your appreciation for what they do. That would mean the world to them. That would mean the world to me. And if you are someone who is a fitness coach right now, I know we've had a lot of fit pros on, and I know that we've had a lot of people who have had their businesses almost really kind of turned upside down, where they're now not got gyms not open anymore. They're trying to get online. They're all trying to survive and thrive in difficult times. And again, if it's any consolation, then I started literally in this industry with nothing. I didn't have a following or anything like that. You don't need followers on Instagram. You don't need likes on Instagram. You just need intent, and intent to do something good for people eventually over time will pay off for you. So I think that, you know, my intention for everything that I do is to help people. If that is your intent that comes from within, then that will lead to something in the future. It may not be tomorrow, it may not be next week, but sometime that will pay off. When I started again, like way back when, 2017, like I was doing this before then, but 2017 is when I released my podcast. 64 people downloaded that thing. Now I have tens and tens of thousands of people download that podcast all the time. My intent was never to have something that was going to be a hugely successful podcast or a hugely successful business. Not the intent. The intent came from my willingness to help people. And if you are a coach right now, and that is what you're bringing to the table is intent to help, it will pay off for you. It might seem like you're in a little bit of a dark space right now, but it does pay off. And I think that if that runs through everything that you do, with wanting to help people that you coach, with wanting to help people that you talk to for free, into your DMs, into all of those different sorts of things, that will be hugely transformational for your business. And I think that, you know, we can all find ways to show our intent and our compassion and our love for everybody that we come into contact with. So whether it's on social media, we can create nice networks of people that really have beneficial relationships for everybody. And whether that is you're a coach, you're interacting with someone, or whether you are someone from the general public, you can show people your compassion by interacting with them and showing them compassion. And I think that now more than ever, when we're all cooped up in our homes, we're all going a little bit stir crazy. We can all do small things that make a big difference for everybody. And like I said, my intention was never to make this a huge beast of a thing, which has become. Again, it was just to help. So hopefully over the course of the last 48 hours or 24 hours of content or whatever it has been, that you have had some value from it, that you have had some benefit from it, and that you have really, if you've learned, like, even if it's just one thing that you've learned, then that's enough for me to know that this was worthwhile doing. I don't know. I'm very emotional right now. I'm not going to cry on camera, but maybe once it goes away that I will. But right now, I just want to say thank you. Yeah, thank you.